Everyone, welcome to my channel. In today's video, I wanted to share with all of you my recommendations for the upcoming Sephora VIB sale. So if you guys aren't familiar with the sale, it's basically Sephora's biggest biannual sale where the entire store is on sale for between 10 to 20% off depending on your membership level. So for myself, since I do buy a lot of products from Sephora, I am a Rouge member, and so this is always one of my favorite sales of the year. I will say that in recent years, with more products showing up at Ulta and with some of my favorite brands like Pat McGrath and Natasha Denona having their own much bigger sales, the Sephora VIB sale has kind of gone down in the rankings for me in terms of my favorite sales. But I still thought it would be fun to film this video and share with you guys some of the products that I've been really loving lately. Now, because my channel is now a couple years old, I do have a bunch of these previous videos as well. So for today's video, I wanted to really focus on products I've been really loving this year. So not necessarily doing kind of a very holistic view, but really just the products I would recommend the most. If you guys are interested in more recommendations, definitely check out my previous Sephora VIB sale videos or previous best of videos. I still stand by the recommendations in those. Also, I will note that I'm not going to be talking about Pat McGrath in this video because I feel like her sales on her website are always just way better than the Sephora sales. And so I've tried to focus on brands that are either unique to Sephora or where typically, at least I haven't seen as many brand-specific sales that are as good as the Sephora VIB sale. And I will be showcasing as many of the products as possible on my face. So the look I have on now is basically using my recommendations. So if you guys are interested in the products that I have lined up and how I got today's look, then just stick around. So I'm starting off with a bare face for today's look, and the first product that I wanted to recommend for the upcoming sale is this Merit Foundation and Concealer Stick. So this is not a new product in my collection. I've actually had this for over a year at this point, and I've used this for quite a while, but this year really this product has stood out a lot to me. It's kind of risen to be one of my most used complexion products, and in particular, ever since pandemic restrictions were lifted, I've been traveling a lot more, and I found that this basically ended up always in my makeup handbag. It's just so convenient to carry around with you, whether you're going to work or traveling longer distances. It's very compact, it won't leak, and even though I primarily use this as foundation, in a pinch you can also use this as concealer. And I just find it super easy to use because you basically just draw this on your face, and then it's very easy to blend out either with your fingers or with a brush or sponge. And I have this in shade Sand, which as you can tell is a tiny bit warm toned and deep for my current winter complexion, but year-round overall I think this is a pretty decent match. And as you'll see as I blend this out, it's not like crazy high coverage even though it's a foundation concealer stick. So that's why I typically don't use this as concealer. But I do really like that it's just so easy to use because especially if you're on the go, you just sometimes want something where you could really quickly touch up without any issues, or you just don't really need any brushes or sponges in order to apply. I do prefer applying this with a brush or sponge, but as you can see, it's super quick and easy just to blend in on its own. And it leaves a pretty natural finish on the skin. So if you compare the two halves of my face, you can see that it's not like completely perfected, but definitely this side is just a little bit more even in comparison to this side. It still also has kind of a nice natural finish to it, so it's not going to make your face look too dry or matte. And for me, what really sealed the deal with this foundation this year as well was I actually did a comparison video between this and the Tom Ford foundation stick. For the other side, I'm going to show you guys with my rougher sponge blending it out. And I really thought that the Tom Ford would win out because I bought that this year, and the purpose of buying it was because I was enjoying this stick so much. I wanted kind of a more luxurious upgraded version just to kind of treat myself. But I was actually really surprised that I liked this stick so much more than the other one, even though I feel like the other one has gotten really rave reviews on YouTube. And so that was really helpful for me just from kind of a perspective setting standpoint. I was like, wow, actually, even though this was my first foundation stick, this is one of, if not overall the best, at least for my preferences. So that's why I would highly recommend this. And here we have it on both sides of my face. If I was just wearing this on its own, I would probably go in with another layer of coverage, but today I am going to use a separate concealer, which is typically what I do if I want to use this for a slightly more glam makeup look. And the concealer I'll be using is the Dior Forever Skin Correct Concealer in the shade 2N. This is also not at all a new product. This has been around for a very long time, but this is a product that I kind of fell in love with this year, and so wanted to include in this recommendations video. So I'm gonna just put this everywhere where I could just use a little bit more help. I'm gonna first just do this side of my face, so again, you can see the difference. And there's several things that I really love about this concealer. It's basically become one of my overall top 3 concealers at least. So first off, I really like the shade of this. You can see that 2N on me is a very nice neutral tone, which I really appreciate because pretty much all my other concealers have a much stronger peach undertone to them, which is not terrible because that does help a bit with color correcting on my skin. But if I want something that is just truly neutral, that isn't going to add a lot of cast to my skin, I think this is perfect. Also, as you can see, it blends in like a dream. When I'm traveling with this product, which I do very often travel with just these two as my only complexion products, I do find it's just so easy to blend in as well. You can just use your fingers, which is what I often do when I'm traveling. But as you saw today with a sponge, it also blends in super easily that way. And I think it has pretty good coverage for how lightweight it feels on the skin. So you can still see this blemish a little bit, but everything else was covered up pretty well. When it comes to really big blemishes like this, I like to just go in like that, kind of leave it to set for a little bit and then tap it in with the finger. But comparing the two sides of my face, you can see just how much more perfected now this side looks in comparison to this side. And for the longest time, I was really on the fence whether to pick up this concealer because I really love my Pat McGrath concealer and didn't really think it could get much better than that. And definitely this and the Pat McGrath are kind of head for head in terms of my overall top concealer at this point. But what's really special about this concealer is the finish that it leaves on the skin. So I still like going in with my Pat McGrath if I just want super high coverage and super long wear time, but I like this concealer better on days when I want something that looks a little bit natural and also has a really nice blurring effect on the skin. I feel like whenever I use this concealer, it not only provides coverage, but it also just provides more of kind of a filtered look to the skin. Even before I apply any powder, I feel like it almost already looks like I've powdered with a blurring powder. And then once I do go on top with a powder, that really locks it in and seals in the blurring effect for the rest of the day. It's also really good at not creasing with or without powder, which I really appreciate. I think the formulation is just very lightweight, so it doesn't really pool into your creases as much. Now it will still, of course, crease and crack a tiny bit. I think that's just the case with all concealers. At least I've never found a concealer that is immune to that, but this is basically as close as I've experienced in my collection. So now that this has sat for a little bit, I'm just gonna tap this part in. And there, you see that that basically concealed it very nicely. And let me actually just turn down the brightness a little bit so you can really see both sides a lot better. So I went off camera to do my brows and face powder. In case you guys are curious, I will have all the products linked down below. For today's video, I am sticking all to products that you can buy from Sephora that I love and would highly recommend. I'm just not talking through all of them since some of these products I have recommended in previous videos. So now let's get into eyeshadow. Normally I would do the rest of my complexion first, but I'm kind of feeling like I want to mix it up a bit just because, you know, sometimes you do bronzer and blush and then after eyeshadow you kind of feel like you need to add more. And so let's do eyeshadow first. So first I have my favorite eyeshadow release of the year, which has been the Natasha Denona Yucca palette. So if you guys watched my recent Natasha Denona rankings video, this palette remarkably shot up to be the #1 palette, which is saying a lot because I've been collecting Natasha Denona for quite a while. But I really love this palette because it's just such a unique color story at a time when I feel like so many of the makeup brands are kind of coming out with the same color story over and over again. This is just very unique in that it has such a nice mix of tones that are really good for a very everyday approachable look. In fact, yesterday I used this palette for kind of like a pumpkin inspired look that was very cute, very muted, very approachable for the fall. But you can also definitely amp this up and make it much more colorful, much more shiny, much more deep. And so I feel like this just has a ton of versatility in terms of what you can do from a creative perspective with this palette. Also, I really love Natasha Denona's sparkling metallic formula. And this is one of the first times that she's put so many in one palette. So this palette has 4 shades that are in her sparkling metallic. And for me, this is a really big deal because for a long time, I've always wanted to go into my Pat McGrath palettes after using my Natasha Denona palettes because I felt like without the glitter toppers, there just wasn't enough sparkle from Natasha Denona. With this sparkling metallic formula, though, I don't feel that way anymore. I feel like it stands alone super nicely. I don't need any additional glitz or glam. So I've been a huge fan of this palette, would highly recommend if you want something that is a bit more interesting color story wise and is perfect for the summer and fall. Next, I have 3 palettes that are in a very neutral color story. These 3 are basically the ones I've been using the most whenever I've been traveling or wearing makeup for work because they just have the perfect kind of neutral, leaning, cool color stories. So first off, we have the Dior Soft Cashmere palette. This is very much not a new release, but kind of similar to the Merit. It was a product that I really fell in love with this year and started using a lot. You can see this is overall quite a cool color story, but I find that the formulation in this is just so incredibly easy to use. This dark matte over here especially, even though it's super pigmented, it's just so easy to blend out, build up. And even though this palette has a very consistent color story, there's still quite a lot of versatility you can get. You can get something super, super natural if you just kind of focus on these shades over here. So this one, especially in the center, is sort of like my skin tone, just slightly more enhanced. And so this all over the lids gives a super, super natural look. If I do that and then just deepen it up with this matte, then it's very much a no makeup type of situation. But then if I add in some of the other shades, it really adds to kind of the smoky look. In particular, this one over here is actually super high shine, very fun. So I've really been enjoying this palette and taking it along with me, especially when I travel. Speaking of travel, you'd be hard pressed to find a more compact, easy to use travel palette than this Kaja Bento in the color story Chocolate Dahlia. So this is basically the perfect little palette if you just want a super simple travel palette. So it has this chocolate brown shade, sort of a transition shade that on me is really like the perfect transition shade, and then a shimmery pearl shade. And this mirror is really quite useless, at least for me, but usually I have another mirror as well when I travel. So I've been taking this pretty much every time when I go on trips because especially I find that this taupey shade is perfect to set up any look. And also if I want something that is just a very one and done look, this is a great way to go in. This chocolate matte as well is very easy to use. Not as deep as the Dior one, but especially if you just want more of an everyday look, this is really perfect. And I wouldn't say the shimmer is necessarily my all-time favorite or anything, but it gets the job done. It provides just a little bit of sparkle. You can either sort of sheer it out a lot for a more natural look or really build it up if you are going for something more glam. And then finally we have the YSL Mini Clutch. So this is a newer release than the rest, and I was debating whether to put this in because it's been sold out forever, but I do think it recently restocked at Sephora. This color story, Stora dolls, might still be out of stock, but in case it comes back in stock, I wanted to share it with you guys. So I do feature a full look using this palette in a separate video, which is my luxury makeup haul video. If you guys want to see sort of more of an in-depth review of this or the other palettes, I do have videos where I have done a full look with them. But this for me is just a slightly more neutral version of the Dior. It's kind of like in between the previous two palettes. It's a little bit cooler toned than the Kaja and a little bit more glam than the Kaja, but it's less cool toned and more natural than the Dior. So for this palette, it might look a little bit boring when you see it at first, but actually other than this dark chocolate matte, the rest of the shades actually pack quite a lot of shine, which really surprised me because I knew this would be a very shiny shade, but I was really not expecting these two shades to provide much shine. But let me just give you guys a couple swatches of these two in particular. So hopefully you can see a little bit here just how they're actually quite reflective. They're not at all matte, even though they might look like cream mattes in pan. And why not? Since we already swatched those two, let me also just swatch the other two shades so you guys can see. This is a really gorgeous formula, very creamy, very unique for luxury makeup. So if you are looking for something that is very subdued, I would say that this is not necessarily the best palette for that. You can definitely get a more subdued look with the other two. But if you want something that has really a luxurious feel but is actually quite glam, this palette is perfect. So bringing you guys closer, for today's look I thought it'd be fun to actually use these three palettes to create a composite neutral look, so that way you can see some of these formulas in action. So first I'm going to start off with the taupey shade in the Kaja Bento. This blends out super easily. I'm using my Refer number 27 brush right now, and as you can see on my skin tone, this is really a lovely transition shade that can set up pretty much any look, which is what I love about it so much. And as I mentioned before, if I'm on the road and just want something that gives my eyes a little bit more dimension, kind of like that bronzer in the crease look, then this is sort of a very reliable shade for that. You can really just leave your look at this, maybe add some eyeliner or some mascara, and then you're good to go. For today's look though, I do want to deepen it up, so I'm going to go in with that deepest shade from the Dior palette, because I do find this just to be such an impressive chocolate. As you can see, it's super pigmented when you first apply it, which is actually quite unique among luxury brands. I find they tend to have shadows that are a little bit less pigmented because you're going for that sort of more natural, elegant look. But I do really appreciate the ability to add depth, which this palette really does very well. And as you can see, it just blends out super seamlessly. It gives you a lot of control. Now for the shimmers, I'm going in with the YSL palette. Normally I'd probably just go directly into this shade, but I do want to show you guys just how pretty this shade is, because this really surprised me when I first got this palette. I was not expecting this shade to have any shine to it. I was treating it like kind of a matte transition shade. So I was quite surprised at just how reflective it is. So as you can see, the shade itself is very similar to that taupey shade, but hopefully it comes across in camera. But there's definitely like kind of a silvery effect to it, so it definitely adds some unique glossiness to the lids. This is really nice if you want something that is a bit shiny, but still kind of under the radar. Now turning my brush, and this is my GSN 9 from Chikuhodo, I am going to go into the glitzier shade and kind of concentrate that on the middle of my eyelids. This definitely packs a punch, especially if applied with a finger. Look at how shiny that is. Wow, really, really pretty. For today's look overall, I'm not trying to do anything too intense, but still really appreciate that shine. And then just cleaning that off a bit, I'm going into the lightest shade and tucking this in the inner corners just for a little extra light. And now I'm just going to go back in with those mattes, starting with the deeper matte just to further enhance the depth, and then finishing off with a little bit more of the transition shade in the crease. And now for the lower lash line, I'm going to more or less repeat what I did on top. So I'm first going in with that transition shade using my Refer number 28 brush, taking some of the Dior matte as well, add some smoke. And then just to mix it up a bit, I'm going to go into this shade, which is the shiniest shade in the Dior palette, and use this on the inner thirds of my lower lash line, just so you guys can see how beautiful this shade is, because I also really love this. It's sort of a silvery taupe, very reflective and high shine. And then for inner corner and brow bone, I'm going to go in with my mini booster into the shimmer from the Kaja Bento and just use this to add a little bit of extra light to the look. This is a bit of a smoother shimmer than what you'll find in the other two palettes. So here we have the finished eyeshadow look. And here we have the look with some eyeliner. So now let's get into complexion. So for bronzer today, I was thinking about what to showcase, and if you guys watched my recent cream bronzer ranking, you know that the Charlotte Tilbury came out overall on top, but I have featured that a lot in previous videos. I'm pretty sure I've recommended it in the past. And so for today's video, I wanted to focus on the LYS cream bronzer. This is a product that, other than in that cream bronzer ranking, I don't think I've actually used on my channel that often, but has definitely been one of my favorite finds of the year. I'm actually normally not much of a cream bronzer fan, but this product definitely changed my mind. So I'm going in with my BK Beauty 111 brush, and what I really love about this cream bronzer is that it's so emollient and easy to blend out, but also very controllable. I feel like that's always for me the tricky part of cream bronzer, whether I really have enough control over it in comparison to a powder. But for this product, even though it's a stick that you kind of apply directly to the skin, I find that it's never patchy at all, and you have a good amount of playtime with it, but then it really sets and just looks very natural on the skin. I have the shade Harmony, which is honestly probably a little bit deep for my winter complexion right now, but is still really lovely overall. So there we go. Super, super easy. As you can see, here's Harmony on this side, and then we don't have anything on this side. In addition, I really like how this formula is not very sticky. I often have that issue with cream bronzers. They never really set down. Your hair kind of sticks to them. But I find that this one is pretty good at actually setting at some point, and then you don't really have to worry about it. So that way, if you don't want to kind of completely powder your face, it's not like your look is going to be really messy afterward. You can just kind of leave it. Like today, I did not powder the perimeter of my face, and I think I'm just going to leave it like this. I'm going to go in with my cream bronzer, cream blush, without any further powder, and with the products I'm showcasing today, I think that should not be a problem at all. And then taking a little bit on this BK Beauty 112 brush, I'm just going to add some nose contour as well. So this has basically been my go-to on days when I want a slightly more natural bronze, and I've been really surprisingly loving it as someone who typically does not actually like cream products. Speaking of surprisingly good cream products, I've been thinking for a while about doing a cream blush ranking, and it's still definitely on my to-do list. There's just so many different formulas at this point. But if I did do one, the #1 product would be the Danessa Myricks Cream Blush. And this to me was pretty surprising because this is a very pigmented formula, so I really wasn't sure how much I would like it. But this paired with my BK Beauty 109 brush is just so perfect. What I love about this blush is, as someone who, again, is much more of a powder person, I find that this formula is kind of the perfect in-between. It gives you really that natural, healthy effect that is unique to creams and very hard to achieve with powders. But because this has that Upsolite technology, which is unique to Danessa Myricks, it has more of a powder dry down to it. You don't have to worry about setting this. Again, it's not going to stick to your hair or anything. And as you can see, it also does blend out very easily. So even though it's extremely pigmented and you should only build it up carefully if you have sort of a lighter skin tone, I feel like it's just so easy to use and super, super beautiful. It's also really long lasting, which is something I often have an issue with cream blushes. Sometimes, like by the time I am a few hours into my wear, the cream blush is nowhere to be seen, but this definitely sticks for the whole day. And the shade that I have on today, Rosé and Brunch, is a very nice, very versatile shade, at least for my skin tone. I feel like I can use it with pretty much any look, and it gives me a healthy, pinky, peachy flush. Now moving back over to the powder side, there are 2 powder products that I did want to recommend to you guys. So first off, of course, there is this Hourglass palette. I have this in the owl case, but this is the Jellyfish interior. So I think the owl case is exclusive to Hourglass, so if you do buy it during this sale, you'll have to get this in the Jellyfish color story. But this has just been one of my favorite releases of the year. So I always pick up these Hourglass palettes and have accumulated quite a few at this point. And so I really wasn't expecting to like this release that much in comparison to my existing Hourglass palettes. In particular, I typically go in with my Sculpture 6-pan. That's like my ride or die face palette, not just from Hourglass, but in general. So I've been really surprised that this palette has really been giving it a run for its money. I think actually for my upcoming trip, I'm gonna bring this palette instead of that palette, which is gonna be like the first time I've switched it up. But basically what I love so much about this palette is that this bronzer over here is by far the most neutral bronzer I've ever tried from Hourglass. Typically their bronzers run a little warm for me. So if you get the Leopard palette, for example, which is the medium skin tone color story, I have that bronzer in last year's Elephant palette, and I do find that just a little bit orangey for my taste. Part of why I love the Sculpture 6-pan so much is that bronzer is more of kind of a rosy undertone, so it's also a little bit more neutral. But this one's even better in that it's actually truly neutral. It's not rosy, it's not orange, it's just kind of a really nice tan on my complexion. And so for me, it works really well for the kind of bronzer look that I tend to go for. I usually don't use a separate contour and bronzer. And so I find this is just super versatile. It's also matte, unlike a lot of Hourglass bronzers. So similarly, if you want that kind of natural bronze, chiseled look, then I think this is perfect. In addition, I really enjoy the blushes in this palette. They're not necessarily the most unique blushes ever, but I find that they're perfect for kind of an everyday look. And these 2 finishing powders, even though they're quite light and I was really worried whether they would work for my complexion, I think because the formulation's so sheer, it still does work out. So actually for today's look, I'll use a bit of the finishing powders just to kind of tie everything together with my look. So I'm going in with my detail brush from Sonia G. And on camera, I think it's sometimes hard to tell what the impact of finishing powder is because it doesn't necessarily, add any shade to your skin. But in person, basically this adds a certain luminosity to the skin, helps everything really blend together, and gives your skin just a very polished effect. So I'm going to use the lighter one sort of in the center of my face. I would say the only shade in this palette that I'm not like 100% in love with is actually this highlighter, which I guess I'll showcase for you guys today since I don't have another highlight on. It is very pretty, as you guys can see, but it is very frosty on my skin tone. So it's definitely for sort of a cooler toned look where you do want to have kind of a popping highlight. And for me personally, I've been much more into sort of a very natural highlighter look. So when I use this palette, I am much more likely to sort of use this lighter setting powder as sort of a brightening shade instead of going in with this highlight. But if you do like bright highlight, this is definitely a good option. So on the whole, I've been really enjoying this palette, and if you do want something that's a bit more colorful, a little bit more friendly for medium skin tones, I can also vouch for the Leopard palette because I have almost all the shades from that palette. And if you guys are curious and want to see a comparison, I do have a video where I showcase all the shades here and also all the shades I have from the Leopard palette, just to give you guys a side-by-side comparison on my face of how the two color stories look. Another face palette I wanted to give a brief shout out to is the NARS holiday release. So I don't actually have it here today, but I do have their Orgasm on the Beach palette, which they launched a few years ago and is basically the same formulation. So if you guys watched any of my videos featuring this basically shot up to be one of my all-time favorite blush and highlight formulas. It's just a really beautiful baked gelée formula that works super well in giving you a sort of lit from within shimmery blush look. So you're not going to see like individual shimmer particles, but it gives you a really beautiful, healthy flush with some shine to it. And this palette is totally discontinued. You can't pick it up anymore, which made me really sad because for a long time they didn't have this formula available at all. But that's what made me really excited for the latest holiday release because it is the same formula, slightly different shades. I didn't end up picking it up because I think the shades are a little bit too similar to this one if you already have this palette. But for any of you who missed out on this release and want that sort of really gorgeous formula from NARS, that's definitely the best I've tried from them thus far. So we're in the home stretch now with some lip products. So first off, I want to talk to you guys about one of my all-time favorite lip liners. This is Pillow Talk Medium from Charlotte Tilbury. So this for me is the lip liner I always travel with because it's kind of perfect for my lip tone and really any sort of look I'm going for. So you can see with it just on my upper lip how natural it is. It's very much like my lip tone, tiny bit cooler and tiny bit deeper. And here it is all around the lips. So my overall favorite formula for lip liner would still be Natasha Denona. That for me is the longest lasting, creamiest formula I've ever tried. But Charlotte Tilbury is probably number 2 or number 3. It's either between her or Pat McGrath. And this shade is just really perfect for me. So that's why this is one of my all-time favorite lip liners. Super, super easy to use. I always need to have this with me. So if you have a similar complexion to me and are on the market for a lip liner, would highly recommend checking this out. Next, we have the Merit Beauty lipstick in the shade Lave Nude. So this is kind of a new discovery for me this year. It's a really beautiful reddish brown shade. And this is my first time trying the Merit Beauty lipstick formula. I really, really loved their Lip Slick over the past year. That was one of my all-time favorites last year. So I was quite excited to try out this full pigment formula from them. So with one swipe, you can get more of a sheer application with this formula. So it is nice if you're someone who likes to just add a little bit of color and blot out your lips. But you can also, with kind of 2 swipes, get this up to full pigment. And personally, I think this is just the perfect fall shade. And what I love about this formula is that normally I'm someone who only goes for really juicy, super comfortable, almost lip balmy lip formulas because I do have super dry lips. But on days when I want something that's a little bit more lightweight than a lip balm and is very long lasting, this fits the bill. I was actually super surprised when I first tried this just how long lasting it is, even when you eat with it. So it's not going to be transfer proof, but it does have very good staying power, even though it's super comfortable on the lips. And usually when I see a lip formula that has this kind of satin finish that's very lightweight, I tend to worry it's going to dry out over the course of the day and not be comfortable anymore. But this one manages to stay comfortable all day. That said, if you did want some extra hydration, I do have 2 lip glosses for you guys. So one is the Dior Lip Oil. I have this in the shade Mahogany, which is the deepest one. If you guys are curious how this compares with the Clarins Lip Oil, I do have a dedicated video comparing those 2 formulas. But overall, since filming that video, I would say this has really come out on top. For me, the Clarins is just a little bit less hydrating and also has a very strong fragrance to it. Whereas this one is much thicker, kind of sticks to the lips a little bit longer, which for me at least means more hydration. And also the flavor and smell of this is a lot more subtle than the Clarins. So I've really fallen in love with this. And for me, this is the perfect no makeup day lip product. Even though it looks very deep in tube, it's actually very sheer. So as you guys can see from this swatch over here, it doesn't have a ton of pigment to it. With these Dior lip oils though, they do have that sort of pH changing effect where they become a bit pinker on the lips. So you'll see a little bit more pink on the lips than what you see in swatch here. But personally, I really like that because it means it does add a bit more of a youthful appearance to your lips without adding a ton of artificial looking color. And it just provides that instant dose of hydration. It's not necessarily going to last all day, but this is really pleasant to reapply and is very much a my lips but better situation. And actually, let me apply this to my lips today, even though we have kind of enough on them already. But just so you guys can see kind of the glossiness that it adds. Normally I would not apply it on a lipstick that's already so hydrating, but at least you guys can see just how it really adds a lot of dimension to the lips. So the last product is the Lawless Forget the Filler Lip Plumper. And this product was a big surprise to me because normally I do not like lip plumper at all. I've hated every single formula I've tried. But what I love about this product is that it actually does plump your lips, which is kind of amazing. A lot of these don't really seem like they do anything, but this definitely has an effect. But it doesn't feel bad at all. It basically just feels kind of cooling on your lips, not like icy, not tingly, not numbing, just a subtle coolness, and yet it has a really nice effect on the lips. If you guys are curious how this looks on, I did wear this in my last video, which is the Natasha Denona Mini Trio Chrome video. So I do put this on my lips on top of lip liner so you can really see the effect of the lip plumper. But I was just extremely impressed because it completely changed my opinion about lip plumper. It's still not really a product I use all the time, but for me this is kind of what I go for if I just want a clear gloss because it feels as comfortable as any other clear gloss but has the advantage of that slight plumping as well. So that's it in terms of my Sephora VIB sale recommendations for this fall 2023 sale. I would love to hear in the comments what you guys are thinking about picking up, or if you guys have any recommendations based on your own Sephora hauls. I will definitely be picking up some products as well, so definitely stay tuned for an upcoming Sephora haul video. It's probably mostly going to be skincare just because I feel like I'm sort of saturated with makeup, and normally I buy makeup whenever it comes out for you guys instead of waiting until the sale. But definitely stay tuned if you're interested in that. If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you all so much for joining me today, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!